The stars held no mysteries for the Confederation of Civilized Worlds. For over 800 years, their fleets had mapped the galaxy with the patience of librarians cataloging books. Every star system received a number. Every planet got a file. Every species found themselves with a choice that was not really a choice at all. Commander Relix stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the blue and green world grow larger on the main screen. This was assignment number 4847. In his career, the planet looked ordinary enough. Water, land, clouds swirling in patterns that suggested a stable climate. The electromagnetic readings showed a species that had discovered radio waves, but had not yet learned to bend space to their will. Standard analysis complete, Commander, said Science Officer Noval, his forearms working across multiple control panels at once. Single dominant species. They call their world Earth. They call themselves humans. Relix nodded without looking away from the screen. Every species they had ever encountered followed the same pattern. They evolved on worlds with gentle weather and few predators. They built cities in safe places. They fought small wars over resources until they learned that cooperation worked better than conflict. Then they developed technology slowly and carefully, always making sure their inventions would not hurt anyone. Population estimate? Approximately 8 billion individuals scattered across 7 continents. They seem to prefer areas with stable weather patterns. Most of their cities are built away from geological activity zones. Sensible? Any signs of advanced weapons? Novel's skin changed to a pale blue color, which meant he was thinking. They have devices that use chemical explosions to propel metal projectiles. Some larger devices that use nuclear reactions for massive explosions. But nothing that could threaten our shields or hull plating. Relix allowed himself a small smile. The humans were exactly what he expected. Every civilized species went through a brief period where they built weapons that could destroy themselves. It was a natural phase of development. Smart ones learned to control these weapons quickly. The ones who did not learn fast enough destroyed themselves and saved the Confederation the trouble of cataloging them. What about their military structure? It's divided into many small groups based on geographical boundaries. They call these groups nations. Each nation maintains its own military force, but the weapons and tactics appear similar across all groups. They seem to spend most of their military resources watching each other rather than preparing for external threats. This was also normal. Species that evolved on a single world always divided themselves into competing groups first. It took them time to realize that cooperation made more sense than competition. The Confederation had learned to be patient with this phase of social development. Any space-based defenses? Nothing significant. They have small stations orbiting their world and a few primitive probes exploring their local star system. No weapons platforms, no defensive satellites. Their space technology appears to be focused on research and communication rather than military applications. Relix turned away from the screen and walked to his command chair. The chair adjusted itself to his body temperature and posture, just as everything in Confederation technology was designed to provide maximum comfort and minimum stress. This was how civilized beings lived. They built tools that made life easier, not harder. Time to contact? We can be in communication range within 6 standard hours, Commander. Excellent. Prepare the standard integration package. Full translation. Matrix, cultural assessment protocols, and compliance documentation. How many ships do we have in the fleet? 200 vessels, Commander. More than enough for a standard integration. Relix settled into his chair and reviewed the files on his personal display. The humans had been observed for exactly 47 standard days. The observation period was designed to give the Confederation a complete understanding of how a species lived when they thought they were alone. It was important to understand their natural behavior, patterns before making contact. The reports painted a picture of a typical pre-contact civilization. The humans spent most of their time in climate-controlled buildings. They traveled in vehicles that protected them from weather. They grew their food in controlled environments and processed it in clean facilities before eating. When they encountered dangerous animals, they either avoided them or trapped them in special facilities where they could be observed safely. Their entertainment showed the same patterns. They created stories about conflicts and dangers, but these stories were clearly fantasy. No civilized species would actually seek out danger for recreation. The humans who appeared in their entertainment fighting monsters or surviving disasters were obviously fictional characters. Designed to let the audience experience excitement without real risk, Commander Novel interrupted his reading. "We are receiving some unusual electromagnetic signals from the planet." Define unusual. The humans appear to be broadcasting what they call news. Current events happening on their world. Some of the content is ... unexpected. Relix looked up from his files. "Show me." The main screen changed to display translated text scrolling past in the human's primary language. Relix read the headlines. With growing confusion, humans climbing mountains that reached into the deadly thin air of high altitude. Humans deliberately jumping out of aircraft with only fabric devices to slow their fall. Humans racing vehicles at speeds that would be fatal if anything went wrong. "This must be fictional content mixed with their news broadcasts," Relix said. "No species engages in activities with such high probability of injury or death." "That was my assumption as well, Commander. But the signals are coming from their news networks, not their entertainment channels. And we have visual confirmation. From our long-range sensors." Screen changed to show a grainy image captured by their surveillance equipment. A human figure was suspended by ropes on the side of a cliff face, hundreds of meters above the ground. As they watched, the figure deliberately released their grip and fell through empty air before another rope caught them. "What possible purpose could this serve?" Relix asked. "According to our translation algorithms, they call it rock climbing. The databases suggest they do it for fun." Relix stared at the screen. This made no sense. Civilized beings did not risk death for entertainment. They might create safe simulations of danger, but they did not expose themselves to actual harm. Continue. Monitoring their broadcasts. Begin preparation for contact. And run a full planetary analysis. I want to understand what kind of environment produces this behavior. As the Confederation fleet moved closer to Earth, Relix found himself looking forward to meeting these humans. In 800 years of contact with intelligent species, he had never encountered beings who seemed so eager to risk their own lives for no practical reason. He had no way of knowing that what he was seeing was not unusual human behavior. Was humans being careful and taking safety precautions? He was watching a species at their most cautious and controlled, playing safely with dangers they had spent millennia learning to master. The real surprise would come when they gave the humans something actually worth fighting for. The Confederation fleet arrived on a Tuesday morning, their massive ships blocking out the sun over major cities across Earth. Commander Relix had positioned his vessels according to standard protocol, one ship over each major population center. With the command vessel maintaining orbital position for optimal communication coverage, the message was transmitted simultaneously to every radio and television receiver on the planet. Relix had delivered the same speech to 847 different species over his career.
Ow.
The words were polite but firm, offering membership in the galactic community in exchange for integration into Confederation systems. "People of Earth," his voice echoed. "Across the planet in dozens of languages, you have been selected for inclusion in the Confederation of Civilized Worlds. This is an honor reserved for species that have demonstrated the capacity for rational thought and peaceful development. You have 24 standard hours to designate representatives who will oversee the transition process. Resistance is both futile and unnecessary." Relix settled back in his command chair, expecting the usual response pattern. First would come confusion and disbelief. Then fear as the reality of the situation became clear. Then urgent communications between the various government groups as they tried to decide how to respond. Finally, acceptance as logic overcame emotion, and they realized that cooperation was their only rational choice. Instead, the first response came from a small settlement in the middle of North America. An elderly human female had taken what appeared to be a primitive projectile weapon and fired it at one of their surveillance drones. The projectile had somehow passed through the drone's defensive screen and destroyed its main sensor array. Commander reported Lieutenant Vex from the communications station. We are receiving multiple signals from the planet's surface. Most are not coming through official government channels. What kind of signals? The translation algorithms are. Having difficulty processing them, sir? Many appear to be. Insults, Relix frowned. This was not following the standard pattern. Show me. The main screen filled with text scrolling too fast to read completely. The translation system highlighted. Key phrases. Go back where you came from. Earth is not for sale. Try it and see what happens. In many combinations of words that the translation system marked as profanity but could not properly convert into civilized language. This must be a communication error, Relix said. Contact their primary government centers directly. The leadership will be more rational than the general population. The response from the human governments was more formal, but no more encouraging. President Martinez appeared on screen from a facility deep underground, surrounded by individuals wearing military clothing. His face showed no sign of the fear or confusion that typically marked first contact situations. Commander Relix, President Martinez said, "We have received your message. Our response is simple. No. Perhaps you do not understand the situation," Relix replied. "We represent the combined military and technological might of thousands of worlds. Your resistance cannot succeed." "Perhaps you do not understand the situation," President Martinez responded. "This is Earth. We do not surrender." The transmission ended before Relix could respond. Within minutes, reports began flooding in from across the planet. Humans were not waiting for their governments to decide how to respond. They were responding individually with whatever weapons they could find. The most disturbing reports came from the areas around the Confederation ships. Humans were gathering in large groups, not to surrender or negotiate, but to attack. Were using construction equipment as weapons. They were converting civilian vehicles into mobile weapon platforms. Children were constructing primitive projectile devices from school supplies. Commander Science Officer Noval reported with obvious confusion. The humans appear to be treating this as some form of recreational activity. We are detecting elevated levels of adrenaline and dopamine in the population. But these are associated with excitement rather than fear. That cannot be correct. Run the analysis again. I have run it 17 times, sir. The humans are enjoying this. This had never happened before in the history of Confederation expansion. Species were supposed to be afraid of superior technology. They were supposed to recognize the futility of resistance and submit to the logical choice of peaceful integration. The situation became worse when the first wave of Confederation ground forces landed in major population centers. Standard procedure called for a show of overwhelming force followed by the establishment of administrative centers in each city. The human populations were supposed to observe this display of superior technology and accept the new reality. Instead, the Confederation forces found themselves under immediate attack from every direction. Humans emerged from buildings, vehicles, and underground tunnels with weapons ranging from military firearms to kitchen knives. They coordinated their attacks using their primitive communication devices, sharing information about Confederation. Weaknesses and tactics faster than the command structure could adapt. Lieutenant Alex led a pacification unit into the city called New York. His training had prepared him for crowd control, infrastructure protection, and the processing of surrender documents. It had not prepared him for urban warfare against beings who seemed to know their city better than he knew his own ship. "Command, we are taking heavy casualties at grid reference 7-7 Alpha, Alex reported while crouched behind an overturned vehicle. The humans have turned their transportation system into a weapons platform. They are using their underground rail network to move forces without detection." "Impossible," came the reply from the command ship. "The rail system is for civilian transportation? Not anymore, sir. They've armed the trains and are using them as mobile weapons platforms. And sir, they have covered the vehicles with images and texts that our translators cannot process, but which seem to increase the effectiveness of human fighters who see them." What Alex could not understand was that he was looking at graffiti that read, "Remember the Alamo and victory or death?" The humans were not just fighting an invasion, they were fighting with the accumulated fury of every ancestor who had ever refused to surrender to impossible odds. The reports from other cities painted the same picture. In London, humans were using their ancient underground tunnel system as a fortress. In Tokyo, the population had converted electronics factories into weapons manufacturing centers overnight. In Moscow, citizens were attacking Confederation vehicles with Molotov cocktails while singing songs that made their enemies retreat rather than advance. Commander Communications Officer Don reported with barely controlled panic, "We are receiving a transmission from the human military leadership." General Roberts appeared on screen wearing combat fatigues and an expression that Relax was beginning to recognize as the look humans wore when they were about to do something dangerous. "Commander Relax," General Roberts said, "you have made a serious mistake. You have attacked a world that has spent 10,000 years learning how to fight. You have declared war on a species that invented warfare. You have 36 hours to begin withdrawal, or we will show you what humans do to uninvited guests." The transmission ended, and Rayleigh stared at the blank screen. In less than 24 hours, his casualties exceeded the total losses for the entire previous century of Confederation expansion, and the humans were just getting started, for the first time in his career. Commander Relix began to wonder if the Confederation had finally encountered something they could not defeat. The second week of the invasion changed everything. Commander Relix had expected the human resistance to collapse once they understood the true scale of Confederation technology. Instead, the humans did something that defied every model of civilized behavior the Confederation had ever developed. They got better at fighting. The reports flooding into the command ship painted a picture that made no sense to anyone who understood how wars were supposed to work. Civilized species became less effective under pressure. They made mistakes when stressed. They broke down when their infrastructure was damaged. They surrendered when casualties mounted beyond acceptable levels. Humans appeared to work in reverse. The more pressure the Confederation applied, the more effective the human response became. Their attacks grew more coordinated. Their weapons became more creative. Their tactical decisions improved with each passing day. Lieutenant Rex commanded a pacification unit assigned to the city called Detroit. His briefing had described it as a manufacturing center with a declining population, perfect for establishing a Confederation administrative hub. What he found instead was a fortress built from the bones of dead industries, defended by people who treated warfare like a job they were very good at. "Command, this is Unit 7 Delta, requesting immediate evacuation." Rex transmitted from his position inside what had once been an automobile factory. "The humans have converted the entire industrial district into a weapons manufacturing center. They are producing anti-vehicle devices using civilian machinery." "Explain," came the reply from the command ship. "Sir, they have taken machines designed to build transportation vehicles and modified them to build weapons. They are producing projectile launchers, explosive devices, and armored vehicles at a rate that exceeds our casualty replacement capability." What Rex could not explain was that he was watching the descendants of people who had built tanks and aircraft to fight the most destructive war in human history. The skills had never been lost, only temporarily redirected toward peaceful purposes. The humans had not learned how to make weapons in the past 2 weeks. They had simply remembered how to make them better. The situation was even worse in other cities. In Berlin, human engineers had modified their subway system into a transportation network for military supplies. In Seoul, electronics manufacturers were producing jamming devices that interfered with Confederation communications. In Stockholm, civilian scientists had developed a device that could detect Confederation cloaking technology using modified weather radar. Dr. Williams worked in a laboratory that had been a university physics department 14 days earlier. Now it was a research facility focused on one simple question: how do you kill aliens who can cross interstellar distances? The answer, it turned out, was the same way you killed anything else. You found their weaknesses and exploited them. "The power source is the key," she explained to a video conference that included researchers from 17 countries. "Their technology is impressive, but it follows the same physical laws as everything else. Energy has to come from somewhere. It has to be stored somehow, and it has to be transmitted through some kind of medium. "What have you found?" asked Dr. Petrov from Moscow. "Their shields operate on a frequency rotation system. They shift the defensive frequency approximately every 0.7 seconds to prevent sustained attacks from penetrating. But there is a gap during the transition period. If we can time our attacks to coincide with the frequency shift, we can penetrate their defenses." "How long is the gap?" "Approximately 0.003 seconds. The video conference fell silent. Dr. Williams could see the same thought on every face. No human weapon system could be timed that precisely. No human reflexes could react that quickly. However, Dr. Williams continued, "I have been working with the team in Tokyo. They have developed a targeting system that can calculate the frequency, shift pattern, and automatically time projectile weapons to fire during the gap period." Tokyo team had built their targeting system from components salvaged from video game consoles, smartphone processors, and automotive computers. It was not elegant, but it worked. Within 48 hours, similar systems were being manufactured in every major industrial center on Earth. The Confederation had never faced adaptive warfare on this scale. Every tactic they employed was countered within hours. Every technological advantage they deployed was neutralized by human ingenuity. Every protocol in their military manual assumed they were fighting against beings who would eventually break under pressure. Instead, they were fighting against beings who seemed to thrive under pressure. Human military communications were filled with references their translators could not process. Phrases like "remember the Titans" and "death before dishonor" and "no retreat," no surrender, that seemed to make human fighters more effective rather than less. General Roberts coordinated the global defense from a command center that moved locations every 6 hours. The Confederation had tried to eliminate human leadership by targeting command structures, but the humans had simply created new command structures. When those were destroyed, they created new ones again. Command authority seemed to flow through the human population like water, always finding a new path when the old one was blocked. "Ma'am, we have confirmation that the Australian Defence Network is operational," reported Colonel Smith. "They are using modified mining equipment as artillery. Platforms. Accuracy is within acceptable parameters."
Excellent.
"What about the Asian manufacturing centers?" "Production is ahead of schedule. The Japanese facilities are producing 400 targeting computers per day. The Korean factories have converted their electronics production lines to communications equipment. The Chinese industrial centers are manufacturing ammunition at levels that exceed our consumption rate. And the European research facilities?" Dr. Williams reports that the shield penetration system is ready for global deployment. The German engineering teams have developed a delivery system that can be manufactured using civilian automotive equipment. Roberts studied the global status display. 6 months ago, these same nations had been competitors, each focused on their own interests and suspicious of the others. The alien invasion had done something that decades of diplomacy had failed to achieve. It had given humanity a common enemy and a shared purpose. The transformation was visible in every aspect of human society. Entertainment industries were producing propaganda films that boosted morale and explained military tactics. Sports stadiums were being converted into training facilities and weapons testing grounds. Social media networks were being used to coordinate resistance activities and share tactical information. Most remarkably, the humans seemed to be enjoying themselves. Their communications were filled with humor directed at their attackers. They created cartoon images mocking Confederation technology. They invented songs that celebrated human victories and ridiculed alien defeats. General Communications Specialist Lee reported, "We are receiving a priority transmission from the Confederation command ship." Commander relics appeared on the main screen, and General Roberts could see the strain in the alien commander's posture. The confident being who had demanded Earth's surrender 2 weeks earlier looked like someone who had not slept in days. General Roberts' relic said, "I believe it is time we discuss terms." "What kind of terms?" General Roberts replied. "Terms for ending this conflict before it escalates further." General Roberts smiled. It was not a pleasant expression. "Commander, I think you misunderstood the situation. We are not looking to end this conflict. We are just getting started." By the third week, the Confederation's scientific teams finally completed their detailed analysis of Earth. Chief Scientist Kotel had been working without rest, trying to understand how a species that appeared so ordinary could fight with such unexpected effectiveness. The results of his planetary survey changed everything. The Confederation thought they knew about the humans. Kotel requested an emergency meeting with the command staff. He arrived at the briefing room carrying data files that made his hands shake. Commander Relics noticed that his science officer's skin had turned the pale gray color that indicated extreme stress. "Commander, we need to discuss the planetary classification immediately," Kotel said without the usual formal greetings. "I believe we have made a serious error in our assessment of this world." The briefing room fell silent as Kotel activated the holographic display system. Earth appeared in the center of the room, rotating slowly. But now it was covered with data overlays that painted a very different picture than their original survey. Gravity coefficient, 1.2 times Confederation standard. Kotel began. "This means these humans spend their entire lives under gravitational stress that would require mechanical assistance for most Confederation species. Their bones are denser than ours. Their muscles are stronger than ours. Cardiovascular systems are more efficient than ours." Commander Relix felt a cold sensation in his chest. "But they look so ordinary in our initial observations," said his. "Because we were observing them in their controlled environments, sir. We saw them in their cities, their vehicles, their climate-controlled buildings. We did not see them in their natural state." The holographic display changed to show weather patterns across Earth's surface. Massive spiral formations covered large areas of the planet, some larger than entire Confederation worlds. Atmospheric violence coefficient. This planet regularly generates windstorms with velocities exceeding 300 kilometers per hour. These storms carry enough energy to destroy any structure not specifically designed to withstand them. The humans call them hurricanes and tornadoes. They build their cities directly in the paths of these storms. "They must evacuate when the storms approach," said Strategic Officer Morix. "No, sir. They have developed early warning systems, so they can prepare to survive the storms in place. Some humans actually travel toward these storms deliberately. They have professions dedicated to flying aircraft directly into the storm centers for research purposes." The display shifted to show geological data. Red zones covered most of the planet's surface, indicating areas of tectonic instability. Geological violence coefficient. The planet's crust is highly unstable. It regularly shifts without warning, generating ground accelerations that would destroy any Confederation structure. The humans build their largest cities directly on top of the most active fault lines. "That makes no sense," Relax said. "No intelligent species would live in areas of geological instability." "They do more than live there, sir. They have developed architectural techniques specifically designed to survive geological events. Their buildings are designed to flex and move with the ground rather than resist it. They have early warning systems that give them seconds to prepare for ground movement." Kotel manipulated the display to show biological data. The information that appeared made several of the command staff step backward involuntarily. Biological threat coefficient. This planet has evolved what can only be described as megafauna, predators that actively hunt beings the size of humans. Land predators exceeding 400 kilograms with bite forces that can crush Confederation hull plating. Marine predators exceeding 5,000 kilograms with sensory systems, is capable of detecting electromagnetic signatures at distances of several kilometers. The humans must live in protected areas away from these creatures, Morix suggested.
"Oh, sir."
They deliberately enter the habitats of these predators for recreational purposes. They call it camping, hiking, swimming, and diving. They consider exposure to predation risk a form of entertainment. The room was completely silent now, except for the hum of the life support systems. Kotel continued his presentation with data that grew more disturbing with each revelation. Furthermore, the planet regularly exposes its inhabitants to radiation levels that would require protective equipment for Confederation personnel. Solar radiation, cosmic radiation, and naturally occurring radioactive materials. The humans have developed biological adaptations to survive radiation exposure that would be fatal to most Confederation species. Temperature variation coefficient. The planet's surface temperature varies by over 100 degrees between different locations and seasons. Humans live in areas where the temperature regularly drops below the freezing point of water and in areas where it regularly exceeds the boiling point of most organic compounds. But their cities appeared so peaceful in our initial surveys, Relix said weakly. Yes, sir. That is because their cities represent the final victory in a 10,000-year war against their environment. Every human settlement is a fortress built on the ruins of previous settlements that failed to survive this planet's attempts to kill them. Kotel changed the display to show human population distribution over time. The pattern showed waves of expansion and contraction as human civilizations rose and fell in response to environmental challenges. The humans did not evolve on this planet despite its hostile environment. They evolved because of it. Every environmental challenge made them stronger. Every natural disaster eliminated the weak and selected for traits that improve survival. Every predator taught them new ways to fight. Every storm taught them new ways to build. Every earthquake taught them new ways to adapt. Their peaceful behavior in our initial observations was not their natural state. It was their controlled state. They have spent millennia learning to control their environment, but the skills required to survive this world are still present. In their population, the display showed human recreational activities that the Confederation had initially dismissed as fictional entertainment. Rock climbing, skydiving, deep-sea diving, extreme sports that deliberately exposed humans to risks that would terrify most Confederation species. What we interpreted as irrational risk-taking behavior is actually humans practicing survival skills in controlled environments. They maintain their edge by regularly exposing themselves to measured doses of the dangers their ancestors survived. Their military effectiveness is not the result of superior technology or tactics. It is the result of being a species that has spent millions of years fighting everything on their planet and winning. Commander Relix stared at the holographic display, finally understanding what they had encountered. The Confederation had not invaded a normal world with a typical species. They had attacked the survivors of a planetary-scale war that had been raging since life began on Earth. Sir, Communications Officer Nex interrupted the briefing. We are receiving a transmission from the human leadership. They're requesting a meeting to discuss terms. Terms of surrender, Relix asked hopefully. No, sir. They want to discuss our surrender. The command staff exchanged glances. For the first time in Confederation history, they were facing a species that might actually be more dangerous than they were. The humans were not just defending their world, were treating the invasion as practice for whatever they planned. To do next, accept their communication requests, Relix said finally. It appears we need to reconsider our approach to this situation. The meeting took place aboard a neutral vessel positioned halfway between Earth and the Confederation fleet. Commander Relix had agreed to the human request for face-to-face negotiations, though he was no longer certain who would be negotiating with whom. The past 3 weeks had shattered every assumption he had about how civilized warfare was supposed to work. The human delegation arrived in a spacecraft that looked like it had been assembled from spare parts and determination. The vessel bore no resemblance to any design in the Confederation database, yet it had traveled from Earth to the meeting point faster than most Confederation shuttles could manage. Worse, their sensors indicated that the human ship was armed with weapons that had not existed 3 weeks earlier. President Martinez entered the conference room flanked by General Roberts and Dr. Williams. None of them showed the deference or fear that typically marked species facing superior technology. If anything, they looked like people who had come to conduct routine business. Commander? Relix had prepared for this meeting by reviewing every protocol in the Confederation diplomatic manual. None of them covered the current situation. The manual assumed that inferior species would recognize their position and negotiate accordingly. It did not explain how to deal with beings who appeared to consider interstellar invasion a learning experience. Commander Relix, President Martinez said, as he took his seat across from the Confederation delegation, thank you for agreeing to this meeting. We have a proposal we think you will find interesting. We are prepared to discuss terms for your integration into the Confederation, Relix replied. Though the words felt hollow even as he spoke them, General Roberts smiled. It was not a reassuring expression. Actually, Commander, we are here to discuss terms for your withdrawal from human space. Our withdrawal? Dr. Williams activated a small device that projected detailed schematics of Confederation technology into the space above the conference table. The images showed shield generators, weapon systems, and faster-than-light drive components. Every detail was perfect. Every specification was accurate. We have had 3 weeks to study your technology, Dr. Williams explained. It is quite impressive for a civilization that has never faced serious opposition. However, there are several significant inefficiencies that we have identified. She manipulated the holographic display to highlight specific components. Your power distribution systems operate at approximately 68% efficiency. Your shield generators have exploitable resonance frequencies at 17 different wavelengths. Your faster-than-light navigation system relies on gravitational mapping that can be disrupted using modified communications satellites. Relix felt his breathing apparatus tighten. You cannot have reverse-engineered our technology in such a short time period. Commander President Martinez said, "You seem to be operating under some false assumptions about human capabilities. We went from wooden tools to nuclear weapons in less than 12,000 years. We went from the first powered flight to landing on our moon in 66 years. We have had 3 weeks to study technology that represents the combined scientific achievement of hundreds of worlds." General Roberts leaned forward. "More importantly, we have realized something about your Confederation. You have been expanding for centuries by absorbing civilized species who surrender when faced with superior numbers and technology. You have never actually fought a war. That is because warfare is irrational when faced with overwhelming superiority, perhaps for civilized species," General Roberts replied. "But we are not civilized. We are humans. We are what happens when evolution runs out of ways to kill a species and decides to make them better at killing everything else." Dr. Williams manipulated her device again, and the holographic display showed star charts with human modifications. "We have already begun production of faster-than-light vessels using improved versions of your technology. Our first interstellar ships will be ready for launch within 6 months. That is impossible. Commander, we have converted our entire global manufacturing infrastructure to weapons production in 3 weeks. We have developed new technologies, new tactics, and new strategies specifically designed to counter your advantages. We have done all of this while fighting a defensive war on our home world." President Martinez slid a document across the conference table. "These are our terms for ending this conflict." Relix looked at the document with growing disbelief. It was not a surrender. It was a treaty that outlined the complete withdrawal of Confederation forces from the solar system, reparations for damages caused during the invasion, and a mutual non-aggression pact that would prevent future Confederation expansion into human space. "You cannot seriously expect us to agree to these terms." "Actually, we can," General Roberts said, "because the alternative is worse." "What alternative, Doctor?" Williams smiled. "Commander, we have spent 3 weeks learning how to fight your technology. We have identified the locations of 17 Confederation worlds based on navigation data recovered from your damaged ships. We have developed weapons specifically designed to counter your defenses. And most importantly, we have unified our entire species around a single goal." "What goal?" "Making sure that no one ever tries to invade Earth again." The implications of her words settled over the conference room like a cold fog. The humans were not just defending themselves. They were preparing to take the war to the Confederation. You would attack worlds that have never threatened you? President Martinez looked genuinely surprised. "Commander, you attacked a world that had never threatened you? You attempted to conquer 8 billion people who were minding their own business? Did you expect us to simply accept that? The Confederation brings peace and prosperity to the galaxy?" "The Confederation brings conquest and submission," General Roberts corrected. "You offer peace to species that surrender without fighting. What do you offer to species that refuse?" The question hung in the air unanswered. The truth was that no species had ever refused. The Confederation had never needed to develop policies for dealing with determined resistance. "Our terms are simple," President Martinez continued. "You withdraw from our solar system. You pay reparations for the damage you have caused. You agree never to approach human space again. In exchange, we will not reverse engineer your faster-than-light technology and come looking for your homeworlds. And if we refuse, then we will demonstrate why attacking Earth was the worst mistake in Confederation history. Commander Relics looked at the document again. In the margin, someone had written a note in human script. His translation software processed it. Thanks for the technology upgrades. Earth.
No.
The humans had turned the invasion into a learning experience. They had used Confederation technology to leapfrog centuries of development in 3 weeks. They had transformed from a single-world species to an interstellar threat in less time than it had taken the Confederation to complete most standard integrations. I will need to consult with my superiors, Relix said finally. Of course, President, Martinez replied. You have 24 hours to respond. After that, we begin field testing our new starships. 3 hours later, the Confederation High Command approved the human terms without debate. 6 hours after that, the first Confederation ships began their withdrawal from the Sol system. Within a week, the entire invasion fleet had departed, carrying with them the news that would change the galaxy forever. Earth had been classified as a Class 12 Deathworld, and marked as permanently off-limits to Confederation expansion. The official report recommended that any future contact with humans be conducted through diplomatic channels, from a safe distance, with extreme caution. On Earth, humanity celebrated its first interstellar victory and began planning for its first interstellar voyage. The age of human expansion was about to begin, and the galaxy was a very large place with room for everyone willing to be reasonable neighbors.